Hello, and welcome to the Money Movement. This is episode 3 of the Money Movement, a show where we explore the ideas and chronicle the issues that are driving this brave new world of digital currency and blockchains. Really excited for today's episode, The Power of Programmable Money. We've got some awesome guests that are coming on today to talk about that with us. And I just want to set this up a little bit. In earlier episodes of the show, we've talked about some of the big picture macro themes. We've also talked about some of the kind of fundamentals of blockchains and stablecoins and how they work. And just to kind of remind folks, how we're looking at this. Basically, when we think about these public blockchain infrastructures, networks like Ethereum, and other what I think of as second and third generation blockchains. As a business, you need to think about these as a kind of new internet operating system. These are these new public networks that anyone can plug into, and they're like operating systems that people can build software on top of. But unlike centralized systems like hosting your server with Amazon Web Services, or a centralized system, these are these decentralized operating systems, which is this really powerful infrastructure that we now have to build applications and really specifically applications that have to do with, secure record keeping, with secure transactions, with value exchange. And so these public chains are really this kind of new distributed compute engines and operating systems for this new class of financially oriented and other types of applications like that on the internet. We also previously talked a little bit about stablecoins. Stablecoins are a big theme here in the Money Movement. And really, in many respects, stablecoins are demonstrating to be like the killer app of these public blockchains. So now today, stablecoins like USDC, like Tether and others as well, are accounting for the majority of transactions on these networks. And so people have always said, what's the killer app for blockchains? The killer app for blockchains is at this point clearly emerging as stablecoins. The ability for someone to take a digital dollar and transmit it anywhere on the internet in open and interoperable way. So we've explored that a bit in earlier episodes. We're going to touch a little bit more on that again today. But a lot of times, people ask me, well, what's the big deal? Why is it such a big deal to have these, digital dollars? Like, don't we already have digital dollars? Don't we already have systems for making these payments? And there's really two key concepts that are really the big deal. So one is that these digital dollars behave more like, digital content on the internet. Just like you can send a photo to any internet connected device to anyone in the world, or open up a video call to anyone peer-to-peer, and that's a free service. Or you can publish a piece of content on a web server and anyone with a web browser anywhere can access it. That open, interoperable nature is what makes the internet so powerful. And we're now bringing that to this kind of digital cash and digital dollars. And what that leads to is a world which will look a lot like the internet: ubiquitous, free exchange of value from anyone to anywhere on the internet. So that's the first part. That is, why is this such a big deal? But the second part of why this is such a big deal is that for the first time ever, we really have the building blocks for programmable money. Now, once you have a digital dollar that exists on the internet as something that can run on these networks, these blockchain infrastructures also provide a way to write code, and to write code that interacts with these digital assets, in particular these digital dollars and stablecoins. And that code is referred to as smart contracts. And smart contracts, we talked about a little bit in episode 1, but are a really fundamental breakthrough, because this is code that can go up on the internet, that is tamper-proof and censorship resistant, and that these digital dollars can be programmed with. And so there's incredible power from this kind of idea of programmable money. And we're in the early stages of exploring that. Many of the breakthrough ideas, or many of the first ideas, are really just coming alive on the internet right now. And I'm really pleased today that we've got three guests, each of whom are entrepreneurs and creators that are really demonstrating some of the breakthroughs that become possible with programmable money. So kicking this off, I'm really pleased to welcome Compound Finance's founder and CEO, Robert Leshner. Welcome to the show, Robert. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yeah.
All right, good. All right, we have it. We have it live. That's great. Welcome to the show, Robert. How you doing?
I'm doing great.
That's awesome. So, I want to start like really high level. We're going to talk about Compound a little bit, but maybe just starting at a really high level, these basic building block ideas of smart contracts and programmable money. Obviously, those are like central to the work you're doing, but help the audience here understand these building blocks. What are these smart contracts? How do you think about this idea of programmable money?
Yeah, and you touched on a couple of good points earlier. The way I think about a smart contract is just a very simple computer program that is deployed on a blockchain, and in the same way that Bitcoin or another asset is deployed on a blockchain, in a way that anyone can see the history of it, can see how it operates, and can see what goes into this computer program. And these computer programs can be very simple or very complex. And what's nice about them is that they work in a predictable fashion. So for a simple computer program or smart contract, it could be something as basic as send money to somebody else on Fridays. Where a more complex smart contract, or series of them taken together, can produce extremely advanced functionality, like build an interest rate market with advanced parameters to it. And what this is set off is essentially rapid iteration and evolution of what's possible with programming money. For a traditional fintech startup, being able to add logic to how money moves and how it works, dealing with all the partners that are required, is extremely laborious. It's slow, it's time consuming, and it's difficult. It's why you see a lot of very incremental improvements in financial products. But with these smart contracts, what you're seeing is an entire community is able to build on each other's work. They're able to see the programs that have already been deployed, use them as components in their own program.
These are like money Lego bricks.
Yeah, think of them as like money Lego bricks. In traditional software engineering, we could think of these as libraries or components.
Sure.
Each of these smart contracts is a Lego brick or a library for other computer programs. And all of this is sort of, building on itself. And we're seeing really fascinating new applications emerge very quickly in this open and shared, financial sandbox.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Obviously, I think one of the things that people have a hard time getting their head wrapped around, I think people understand like, okay, these are like libraries, or these are like Lego bricks, and people can use them. And we have like open source code, and we have, these things. But I think the thing that is hard for a lot of, just business people to understand is that these smart contracts, like they run on this internet computer. They run on like this public operating system. And then once they're out there, that anyone can interact with them as like a shared resource or a shared good, that these are sort of, machine enforced contracts that are on the public internet. And that's I think it's a challenging concept for people to get over. And this idea of, hey, like Compound, which we'll talk more about in a sec, how would you kind of explain that to someone who's not familiar with a decentralized virtual machine or what have you?
Yeah, so I think the best way is with an analogy. So when you deposit money into your bank account, you have really no ability to understand all of the different pieces that go into providing you that financial service. All of the processes and Excel spreadsheets and databases and operations and all the things that go into it that create this very basic financial product for yourself. Put $1 into a bank, have a return, 10 basis points here, whatever it is. There's massive amounts of operations and work behind the scenes to create that for you. Whereas a smart contract on a blockchain is a very simple, tool to create the same financial product or service. The difference is you can see exactly how it works. You can see the lines of code that compose
Mm.
the product or service. You can see exactly how it operates. The community can audit it, vet it,
Right.
and everyone can see exactly all of the logic that went into it and what is expected to happen. And so
This gets to this trust issue, right? Like because it's like this publicly verifiable thing, this publicly auditable thing, that sort of you're dealing with people's value, that public network and public transparency seems like a really key concept here.
Yes, it's one way of reducing surprises by increasing transparency. And in traditional markets, we have a lot of other ways to reduce surprises and create trust and create stability. The advantage of these contracts on the blockchain is, that they're extremely transparent and predictable. And long term, I think that's a direction that most economic activity is going to shift it, because it's extremely pure. It's extremely efficient. There's very little cost in administrating these contracts, and it's kind of like in a lot of ways what people want from financial systems. They want them to be predictable, fast, transparent, fair,
Yeah.
And composable into more complex financial services.
And sort of open and globally accessible in the same way that the internet is, which is really key. Let's turn to Compound a little bit. So I love to talk about Compound. I think stablecoins are a killer app. I think Compound is a killer app because of you're taking this idea of these digital currencies and things like that, and you're effectively, as you said, you're creating an interest rate market. But the way I like to think of it, and you can explain this probably way better than I can, but is this is like a decentralized marketplace for people to lend and borrow. And typically when we think about lending or borrowing, we think about like a loan officer at a bank, and we think about all this sort of complexity. But you've created a marketplace, and there's no company. It's just software that exists on the internet. Talk to us about, where did Compound come from? Where is it today? What does it do? And maybe just in like really basic terms also, for just like a person who runs a business, like what can they do with this?
Yeah, that's a great question. So Compound is an interest rate market, and what it enables people or applications or financial participants to do is to borrow an asset instantly and programmatically using another asset as collateral. So in traditional markets, you see people using houses as collateral and using securities as collateral and accessing money using assets that are well understood. Compound takes this functionality and puts it in a blockchain in an open, transparent series of computer programs that anyone can see how they work and interact with them themselves. And so it enables people to very seamlessly borrow an asset instantly on a blockchain using another asset. So we see that it's a common occurrence where people will say, oh, I have a use case to settle, a trade, or to settle, an international financial use case, or I need liquidity. And they can borrow a stable coin or another crypto asset from Compound programmatically. And we see this, replicating a lot of existing financial market functionality, but in a way that's accessible to anyone in the world programmatically. And
it's really profound, right? So there's a marketplace for borrowing and lending. It exists and is enforced entirely by code on the public internet. Anyone can inspect it to see if it's fair, if it works, if it's trustworthy, etc. And that's, in a sense, if you combine it with stablecoins like USDC, like you now have the ability for potentially billions of people around the world to tap into a lending market with a smartphone and a digital wallet. And that was just something that was inconceivable maybe for them in the past.
All of this was inconceivable just years ago. I think the pace of financial innovation that's occurring with smart contracts and stablecoins is it's a breakthrough.
Yeah, really. So maybe talk a little bit about with Compound today. We talk about stablecoins as a killer app. Like how much are stablecoins used with this Compound protocol today?
Yeah, so stablecoins are the dominant form of economic activity that we're seeing. People like to borrow a stable asset. They like to borrow a dollar instead of borrowing, a volatile cryptocurrency. And people like earning an interest rate on a stablecoin, on a dollar. And what this creates is, it allows anyone in the world to have the same access to the same financial service. So no matter where you are, you're always able to access the same interest rate as someone else, anywhere in the world. And, every country has its own currencies. And what we're seeing is a lot of demand internationally and domestically for people to access a US dollar-based return, or a US dollar-based ability to borrow predictably and in a safe and stable way. And so we've seen over, $1 billion of activity in Compound so far since launching the protocol almost exactly 1 year ago, which, has exceeded all of our expectations.
Yeah, it's amazing. So I won't ask you to make predictions on, what the next 12 months or 24 months looks like, but like clearly this is on a pretty dramatic growth curve, and really, really, really exciting. It's awesome, Robert. Thank you so much for joining today and sharing your ideas in this space of programmable money, and congratulations on the incredible work that you guys are doing. And I wish you continued great success.
Thanks, Eric.
Take care. So pretty interesting stuff here. I think we're seeing these Lego bricks, the birth of these Lego bricks, kind of coming together and building blocks that you can use, stable coins with lending protocols. And we're going to look at a few more here today. I'm going to shift gears for a moment and talk about another really powerful and innovative idea, another Lego brick, if you will, in this new world of composable, programmable money protocols. And that's something that has only just become possible with programmable money and stablecoins on blockchains. And this idea of streaming money and streaming payments. I'd like to welcome and am excited to have us have on the show Paul Razvan Berg, the founder and CEO of Sablier. Welcome to the show, Paul.
Hey, Jeremy. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So I, funny enough, my last business before doing this blockchain and digital currency thing was a streaming video company. And, the streaming protocols and the ability for people to access things on demand, and the ability to do that over the internet, and for a person to connect with another person and sort of stream. People have gotten used to that idea, right? So, back when I was starting that last company, which was way back in 2004, the idea of like streaming your television show or having a streaming video call, like these were like science fiction, or people were skeptical of these things. But the idea of streaming was pretty new. Now we have this idea of streaming money and streaming payments. And intuitively, it makes a ton of sense to me, which is there are moments in time and scenarios in your life as an individual or as a business where you don't want to have a giant payment, but you might want to have that payment kind of metering itself out in different ways. And I guess the existing financial system isn't super well set up to support something like that. But you came up with this idea of streaming payments. Or maybe other people had the idea and you executed on that idea with Sablier. And I'm really excited. It's a very powerful idea. Maybe just first give the audience a sense for like, what does this innovation enable?
Sure. Before you do that, the video streaming company is a very good analogy, because we like to say that just like you can stream movies on Netflix, or like stream movies on Netflix and stream music on Spotify, so you can stream money on Sablier. And what we do is a protocol and a UI for money streaming, which means in a simple form, payments by the second. But payments which are continuous, trustless, and autonomous. They don't require human input. In fact, if you want to interact and integrate our protocol into your own application, you don't have to ask us for permission. You can just read our docs. And
this is one of these Lego bricks, right? So this is out there on the internet. It's a it's a protocol. I want to come back to that in a minute, but like
Yes.
anyone can tap into this. This isn't like I have to do a deal with you guys. It's just like you've created something that people can plug into.
Exactly, and you can just like check out our Ethereum smart contracts. We have an open documentation for that, and we have seen people coming up with use cases that we haven't thought about when we launched the company in the first place. So that was exciting to see.
What are like, help paint the picture. Like what,
Sure.
what does this allow? What does this allow for?
We initially thought about using Sablier for things like continuous payroll, right? So when you're in this remote work environment with people working across borders, it's very hard to enact trust, right? Because you can start working today, but maybe you're paid in 2 or 3 months. With Sablier, that problem becomes another problem because you start a stream, and if the employee doesn't execute, you can just cancel the stream, and vice versa. If the company doesn't pay you, you can just like stop working. But as we grew the protocol over time, we have seen people using this for things like auctions, where people have been bidding up. The way that specific idea worked was that people were auctioning like literally money and saying that I will give you that money back on Sablier as a stream. You just like have to bid higher up and higher up.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody else used this for incentivizing people to reply to your emails. So if you're replying faster, the stream was giving you more money the faster that you replied.
Right.
So yeah, there are many interesting things that you can see happening when you have like an open protocol on the Ethereum blockchain.
Yeah, I mean, when most people think about getting paid, if you're in an advanced economy, it's like I have to go to my payroll company and I have to set up a direct deposit, and there's all this stuff, and it's like every 2 weeks and it's delayed. And we started to see, obviously, like, the mobile internet and other things have made like gig economy, more flexible forms of work, like all possible. And it seems to me like what you're creating is something that, any business or any person who conducts work could really benefit from. This idea that they're, able to kind of, as tasks are complete, or as, work is completed, or, these very flexible forms of work become possible. And it's not some big complex, overhead. It's just, it's as simple as turning on and off and dialing up and down these streams.
Exactly, and you can just like set up a stream in less than 1 minute if you have the tokens, and go to our UI on Sablier the Finance. Exactly, it's very easy.
Okay, so if let's talk about the token. So you guys support USDC, I believe.
Of course. So like Sablier is compatible with any ERC20 token.
Okay. So a lot of different scenarios there, but let's just take the stablecoin one for a moment. So I'm a business, and I basically can connect to this protocol. I can load value into it in advance, and then I can kind of stream out and release funds based on things that are happening, events in my business or work completed or other things.
Yeah, so in V1, you just like have to have the USDC tokens upfront, and you select like a duration, and we will calculate for you a specific payment rate per second. And from that moment on, the contract will just move that money on a per second basis to your recipient. In future versions, we will have like multiple kinds of streams where you can set the payment rate per second by yourself. But for now, that's how it works. You have to preset the streaming period yourself.
I see. It's very, very cool. And because this is like a protocol, as we talked about, it's a Lego brick. Developers can integrate directly to this as well.
Precisely, yes. If you're at the hackathon, we would love to talk to you and show you how you can use this into your own dApp.
Circle is having a hackathon
Awesome.
soon for Circle APIs and USDC, and so we'll make sure that people are hacking with your protocol. It's really exciting. I mean, I think, as you mentioned before, like in this remote work environment, which is obviously the new normal, and in a world where trust and risk are coming under attack, or there's a lot of risk and trust is coming under attack, and And clearly, like, we're moving to this more distributed workforces. Every week we're hearing announcements of like leading technology companies saying, hey, we're going to go distributed. Like, this is all going to change the nature of work, continue to change the nature of work. Where do you see this going? I mean, do you imagine that this protocol like just becomes something that lots and lots of different companies are using to innovate in like their own business models and their own like employee or flexible worker kind of relationships?
My take on that is that like Sablier works very well with this. Another movement that is happening within the Ethereum ecosystem, and that is the DAO movement with
Yes.
These so-called decentralized autonomous organizations. And I'm not necessarily rooting for, let's burn the ship down and forget about all the like old company stock formation and all of that. Those are very good processes, but I think that DAOs can complement the company stock very, very well. And you can have like this global platform where the Ethereum DAO becomes the proxy between all these countries. And of course, Sablier can be used with any DAO. You just need to sign 2 or more transactions to call our contract, but that's it.
Yeah, I'm very excited about that. As I'll mention later, next week, we have the nature of the corporation in the age of blockchain, and we've got Aragon and Open Law and some others. And actually, Kleros, who's joining us, Federico is joining us momentarily, touching into some of these, decentralized forms of how do you operate a decentralized organization. It's really, really exciting. It's really awesome, Paul. I'm really excited that you're able to share with us today what you're working on. I'm really excited to see where it goes, and just thank you so much for joining us, and hope to see you really soon.
Likewise, thank you for having me, and thank you for spreading the word about our money movement here. Right?
Absolutely. Cheers, Paul.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Awesome. Really interesting ideas. Obviously, I when I think about all these things, like these are all really new ideas. Like Robert shared, like Compound launched a year ago, already $1 billion of activity in that. Sablier protocol, really new, and so many interesting ideas happening with it. I like to think back to, if you guys can remember, it was like 2007, actually, like 2008, not the financial crisis, but there's a set of technologies that converged all at the same time. So the iPhone had been out, but it was just like you could only use it with the apps that they had, and it was on a slow network connection. And then the iPhone 3G came out, and it had you could have a faster connection, and they put a GPS chip in there, which other phones had done, but they also connected it to an app store, so you could create software on it. And it was those 3 things combined that allowed creative entrepreneurs to invent things that transformed society that no one had really thought of, or maybe if they thought of them, they couldn't execute them. It gave us Uber. It gave us the sharing economy. And really dramatic changes happened in the nature of work, in the nature of how corporations function. And I really feel like what's happening now with programmable money is really equivalent, and we're seeing some powerful new building blocks when they converge together. They're going to allow people to do some amazing things. So our final guest here is also working on a set of Lego bricks that I think are really critical to everyday payments and commerce. And so joining us from Buenos Aires is Kleros founder and CEO, Federico Ast. Welcome to the Money Movement, Federico.
Hello, Jeremy. Great to be here. And I couldn't help but notice that you have a Kleros logo behind you. That little statue is a icosahedron dice. It's a logo.
It's all part of the product placement idea.
Good production.
Yeah. Well, thank you for joining us today. It's really, really awesome to have you on. I want to just start, talking a little bit about just first this issue of trust, which came up in the prior conversation. We've talked a lot about this issue of trust and how blockchains and stablecoins can change some of that, meaning you can use a trustless network to make a transaction between another party, at the speed of the internet with a kind of final irreversible settlement, which is extremely powerful. And in the current environment, being able to have these digital dollar transactions with people around the world instantly, securely is really powerful, except when there's not entire trust that's there. I think, a big part of the decentralization movement and a big part of the money movement, if you will, is this idea of eliminating, centralized counterparties and enabling more peer-to-peer transactions. But, one of the things that comes up is, well, what if there's not 100% trust there? What if there is some contingency on a payment? And, typically, we use banks, or we use trust companies, we use escrows, we have these other ways to do that. And you have, it sounds like, built, again, a Lego brick, a really powerful Lego brick, which is a escrow system. And there's more to it, obviously, than that, but we'll start with that. You've created an escrow protocol that's compatible with stablecoins like USDC that helps with those scenarios where there isn't 100% trust. Maybe just tell us about this and how this works at a really high level.
Yeah, sure. A big part of the transaction world is about creating trust. And this requires ways to solve problems where there is not a straightforward solution. Like if I hire you to make like a website, for example, on a decentralized e-commerce platform, and there is a dispute between you and I because you claim that I claim that you didn't comply with the specifications. Smart contracts cannot really solve this like in an automated way. You need some like human layer of verification that's going to be like analyzing the evidence and the claim and voting who is right. And this is an important piece of governance for all of this trust to be created in the decentralized ecosystem. Kleros is this core system that's going to provide some human verification and some human decision for claims where there is subjectivity, and one of them could be the e-commerce or the website or service delivery, but there are lots of them. For example, we are in the world of decentralized finance, and you have people from all around the world financing projects through tokens, sales, and so maybe they claim that the team didn't comply with what was promised. So should the next payment be released or not? So you need some human layer for verification and decision there. And so in order for this decentralized world and the money movement to move forward, you need this fundamental piece of governance to solve these kind of problems. And that's what we are trying to do.
So this is fascinating. So again, we're taking these ideas of smart contracts and we're saying, there's a problem, and the problem is, sometimes you need to make a judgment about whether work was performed or whether something that someone promised to do has been fulfilled, and you want to lock the payment in some way where both parties can see, okay, the funds are there, and they're, say the stablecoin like a USDC is sort of there, you can see it, and so it's good funds, right? But then you need to have both parties agree, okay, the work is completed, and then that can be released. And so that basic use case, it sounds like, is supported in the Kleros protocol.
We use it, for example, ourselves in the company when we hire some freelancer to do some, let's say, a translation for us. So we put the money into the escrow, and then if everything goes right, the freelancer gets the money, we are happy, we release the payment. If there is a disagreement on the quality of the service, this is going to be solved by the court of Kleros, where jurors are going to analyze the job that was done and decide. So this is something that we are using today and solve this kind of problems.
So this leads to the other like really big idea here, which is essentially how can we, just like I use different analogies, like, back when, e-commerce marketplaces came out, you had eBay and then, Alibaba and Amazon sellers, and, early on, if I was buying something on eBay, well, how do I know that the person who says they're selling me this autographed baseball or whatever that is, how do I know that they're legit? And so there were these, trust and reputation systems. There was sort of community policing, there's reputation, there's these things to do that. And it didn't require like a court system. I mean, in some ways, but it did rely on, these digital signals or other things to do that. And in some ways, it sounds like what you're doing is you're kind of taking it to the next level, which is, really any kind of transaction that can happen between parties, whether it's people or businesses or others, that happens on the internet. You can introduce like a decentralized arbitration system where people are incentivized to actually, make the right judgment or make a judgment for truth.
That's interesting that you mentioned like eBay or every e-commerce platform or company, because essentially they are courts. So if you have a dispute with another user in the platform, there is an internal court, a private court, where some moderator or some customer service employee is going to make a decision in a fully private way with a fully private process, where you can't have the way as a user to like influence the process, and you don't even know what is the process.
Right. So it's the court of eBay, it's the court of PayPal, it's the court of Amazon.
We don't see it as a court because we see it as customer service, but if you think it through, it's basically a private court. So take this out of this black box, put it on the blockchain so everyone can know how the decision is going to be made, and everyone can know that this is going to be made in a transparent way. And then the users who are going to make the decision are not like influenced in an undue way, and they have the incentives to make the decision in an honest way. So this is what Kleros is trying to do, like put this decentralized, so this system that now is centralized in a decentralized way with the procedural warranty that is going to be conducted in the way that it was said it's going to be done, and the blockchain supports that. Just one comment how it works. You have like different courts within the Kleros system, and users can stake a token into a court, and this gives them the right to be drawn as a juror in that court randomly among all of those who also stake the token. And those who are selected, they're going to have the right to be the jurors in the case. And then there is a whole bunch of game theoretical defenses against different types of attacks, because as this grows, more and more people are going to try to abuse the system. So there is lots of research put into that to work correctly.
So maybe, just thinking about this out loud a little bit, like, we've seen these big open platforms emerge, like let's say YouTube or blogging platforms, or even, take Uber as like a platform where, people can kind of connect to these platforms and generate value for themselves in different ways. If you're really good at creating content, you might earn ad revenue. These sort of micro streams of income. Is your idea that people around the world broadly, that becoming an arbitrator can become a source of income for them by participating in a decentralized arbitration system?
Absolutely. Like if you are some person from, I don't know, the Philippines, or from my city, from Buenos Aires, and you have the expertise to adjudicate like website disputes, as to follow with the previous example, like why? So I could make money by being an arbitrator in these disputes, and this is a very valid source of income for a lot of people who are around the world and trying to make money into the global economy, and they can receive payments and make payments very cheaply with, of course, crypto, and they can do escrow transactions with USDC, of course. So this is a great way for people around the world to be integrated into the global economy.
It's really, really interesting. I think it's people everywhere can sort of monetize their expertise and monetize their trustworthiness, and participate in building this much more resilient infrastructure for how commerce happens.
They can make money and at the same time enable this money movement to move forward by providing governance services for lots of transactions to be done with trust and security. And everyone can participate. That this doesn't discriminate against anyone.
So, a big part of this, obviously, with public blockchains and stablecoins and these permissionless protocols, is it's this inherently global nature, and this idea of entering into, commerce transactions, relationships that are sort of independent of any nation state, anyone. And it seems like you're really helping create a Lego brick, a building block in this programmable money universe that really helps us move in that direction.
Yeah, I'm very happy to do so because, also I'm from Buenos Aires and I live in Buenos Aires. And, this is a country which had so many problems with currency and with government. And so
Right.
that I see really the pain point here and the problem that Kleros can solve and the opportunities that it can bring for inclusion for lots of people. So yeah, that's what we are trying to do.
Yeah, I mean, we explore a lot of these sort of global macro issues here in the money movement as well. And as we know, like the global macro issues, the stresses that are going to happen on currencies, on sovereign governments, on civil society as a result of the economic crisis and the health crisis, it's going to create an environment where people want to participate in the global economic system. They want to participate in labor and value exchange and other things. But it may even be that in some cases their own governance systems are weakened and not trustworthy, and so some really powerful stuff. So this is super, super exciting, Federico. I'm really pleased that you could join us here today to share what you're working on, and really excited to see how it develops. Thanks so much.
Thank you for having me, Jeremy.
Absolutely. Well, so fascinating things, from a decentralized lending market to really innovative infrastructure for how value can be streamed flexibly based on work, to a decentralized system for escrow transactions and adjudicating those. Fascinating stuff. We're obviously in the early innings of this innovation. Creative entrepreneurs, engineers, and others are building right now. This is clearly a massive phase of development that's happening. These protocols and smart contracts really are Lego bricks. So every one of the guests here, each one of the things they're working on, someone can tie those all together and build something with that as well, and combine that obviously with things like Circle's APIs, USDC, starts to really make some interesting things possible. So I think, as I mentioned before, this is leading us into territory which just hasn't been possible before. And so we're excited to see. One of the things in particular that we're excited about, and we sort of touched on a little bit in some of the session today, which is this development of a new kind of infrastructure around corporate forms, the way in which organizations themselves are set up, the way people are incentivized, compensated, governed. Some really interesting innovation happening there. And we're going to be talking about that next week, and I'll share more. But first, just wanted to let everyone know, next week we have a special edition. So we have 2 episodes of the Money Movement next week. And the first is a special edition, which is actually going to be Tuesday at 9 a.m. And it's on some of these bigger macro themes. So it's full reserve banking, narrow bank digital currency charters, and the China model with the Chinese digital currency system. We have an incredible group of guests. We have a senior research member from the Bank of England, Michael Kumloff, who's also done pioneering work at the IMF, including pioneering work looking at how full reserve models of banking actually can lead to less debt, fewer recessions, and higher output. And we're going to talk to him about that. We're going to talk to him about the connection of that to digital currency models and central bank money that backs digital currency models. And then related, we're going to be joined by the IMF's Tommaso Mancini-Grifoli, who is a senior member of the capital markets and market infrastructure team at the IMF. And he's done a lot of pioneering work for the IMF on stablecoins, central bank digital currency models, and in particular, this idea of narrow banks. The idea that there's a special kind of bank charter that is specific to firms that might issue stablecoins, but it's a full reserve banking model that backs that. So some interesting proposals that have come out of the IMF around this that I think are quite resonant these days as we see the growth in stablecoins. And then last but not least, we're going to be joined by Dr. Chanwei David Zhou, chief economist at Wanzhen Blockchain. He's also associate research fellow for the People's Bank of China. He is a deep fintech expert out of China and has also published extensively on the new Chinese digital currency DCEP, and is going to be bringing perspective on DCEP, which is also a full reserve model and the implications for that for fintech, the banking sector, and of course for all of us around the world. So then next on Thursday, we're going to explore the future of corporations in the age of blockchains. This idea that blockchain infrastructure makes it possible to establish new kinds of corporate forms. And we have some really exciting guests for that as well. Professor Jason Potts from RMIT University in Australia. He's done really pioneering work on the microstructures of corporate forms, and in particular, what blockchain infrastructure, in particular permissionless public blockchain infrastructure, is going to allow us to do in rethinking the nature of what a firm even is. So he's going to introduce that. And then we're joined by Luis Quende, who's co-founder of Aragon, which is a really pioneering project in the construction of these decentralized autonomous organizations, and really allows any type of new organization to form and be entirely governed and run by smart contracts on blockchains, which is a very powerful idea. And then finally, Aaron Wright, who is co-founder of OpenLaw. OpenLaw is a infrastructure and a set of open source code that sits at the intersection of the existing legal system and smart contract based models, and really finding a way to bring what are actual contracts into smart contracts and be able to execute more and more of how we run the world on these blockchains. So it's going to be an excellent show, and really looking forward to having those guests. So until next week, stay well, stay safe, and stay informed. Thank you.